Okay. Hi everyone. I just want to start by saying off thank you for taking your time tonight and listening to a presentation that I feel like is very important and relevant in today's society. So first, I want to start you guys off with a question to consider. So if you have been an athlete, what would you say is the biggest barrier you've had to face in your athletic career? Or if you haven't been an athlete, what is one that you just have faced in life? And I'll give you a minute just to think about that. Okay, so my name is Arianna Jackson. I'm a senior at Roosevelt High School, and I am involved in cross country, basketball, and track. So to kind of start my project and how I kind of got started with this was the requirement was 6 to 8 weeks of taking just a course and then 4 to 6 weeks of individual research. And during that time, we had to make weekly blog posts. So the post ones were notes or like facts that I had during my learning. The post twos were just a summary, like a formal summary of my facts. And then post threes were my thoughts and questions that I had about that week. And then to kind of narrowing down my course, I found a course on a website called Coursera. And the course was called Sports and Society, and it was offered by Duke University. And I kind of wanted to pick this course because, one, I'm just involved in sports all the time. And then, two, recently I kind of took an interest in psychology, and I'm actually taking an AP psychology class right now. So I kind of felt combining the two would really benefit me, and it's possibly even something I might want to pursue in college. So kind of just getting a jump start on it now, I thought would be interesting. And then for my individual research, it was over Title IX and then women in sports, and I kind of decided to make that my focus for my presentation tonight. So for my thesis, although both men and women participate in a number of similar sports, women have been underrated, underpaid, and underappreciated for many years, despite legislation efforts such as Title IX. And that's kind of my main goal that I want to come out of this presentation and my main lesson I would like you guys to learn. So hopefully by the end of this, everything kind of connects back and I'll reiterate my thesis at the end. So for our agenda, we're going to start with some background, which is just like facts about Title IX. And then we'll move to politics and sports. So why do us as fans care about sports? And then third, we're going to do gender and racial inequality. So how women's gender and race kind of intersect together. And then lastly, we're going to look at scholarship money and leadership roles. So how women get slighted of money and job opportunities. And in both of the last two categories, specifically how like colored women don't always have the same opportunities. And one other thing I would like to point out for this presentation, you will see a lot of purple, white, and green. So purple is the color that represents woman, and then purple, white, and green together represents woman equality. So I felt like it was important to put that in there to kind of tie everything all together and really represent what my presentation was about. So to start off, background, facts about Title IX. So what is Title IX? Title IX is a law that prohibits discrimination based on sex and education programs and activities that receive federal funding. This was signed into law on June 23rd, 1972, yet I really feel like this law has not really lived up to this potential, and it definitely has a lot more that it could do. So just Title IX in general. Title IX is financial resources for high school and college men teams are much greater than those for women's. The discrepancies have actually gotten so bad for women that they have started to sue their schools for better equity. An example of this was a Georgia high schooler sued her own school for just bad conditions on a softball field that her teammates were getting hurt. I think there was like broken ankles, torn ACLs. Yet the school still like didn't do anything about it. So she took matters into her own hands and actually sued the school and ended up winning and getting a new softball field built for her school. So if we want more girls to play sports, then we have to give them those resources to be able to actually play. So going around Title IX, this has become more relevant, especially like within the past 5 to 10 years. So colleges and universities have started to go around Title IX laws, and pretty much this just means that they're double or triple counting female athletes to fill the equity numbers. So schools count roster spots, and teams will just like double or triple count these people to make it look like they have enough girls on their team when they really don't. I know this happened at Wisconsin, Florida State, and Michigan. At Michigan, an example of this was on their basketball team. They actually just counted like the men practice players as female athletes to try to make it look like they had the same opportunities as men's sports when they really didn't. Um, and then most of these girls are not even like participating. So at Wisconsin, I think it was on the rowing team, they had 165 athletes when they first started, but at least half of them didn't actually like were still on the team when season came to start, but they still counted them just because they came out for like the preseason stuff, even though they never competed or were never on the team when season actually started. So that's just kind of an example of how schools are going around Title IX and not really giving the benefit to women and what they represent in sports. So politics of sports. So why do us as fans care about sports? Sports fandom. So fans are a key component to creating the sports world environment. I feel like I play better with fans. Just it's more energy, more excitement brought into the game. And there's actually something called the Great Transformation, and this happened a while ago. So as a society, we used to play more sports instead of watching them, but now it's kind of flipped. So we watch more sports, and now we don't play as many sports. And this has a lot to do with like programs and stuff like ESPN that have made it so much easier for us to watch sports anywhere and anytime we want to. And it's just made it more accessible for us to be able to tune into sports. And one of the reasons why we tune into sports is just for the uncertainty and the pleasure of not knowing the outcome. Kind of tying into that psychology thing, us as humans, we really like not knowing what's going to happen next. We like the element of surprise. So that's why sports are like super popular, because we never going to know what's happened. Even if we know that the team has good players, the team could have a bad day or something. So we never know what's really going to happen or the end result. And then this can also lead to havoc and the idea of submergence. So submergence is kind of like fans can get too crazy and aggressive, and it's kind of when individuals lose their idea of will and desire, and they kind of just go along with the crowd. So if you see one or two people starting to storm the field, then you're probably going to storm the field because you're in that environment, and you're going to lose your sense of will and just kind of want to go with the crowd. So that's how sports can kind of get crazy and get out of hand sometimes. So why do youth excel at sports? Most of the athletes in our sports today are younger, and I did some research on this, and this is actually due to society having a fear of death or injury. So as we get older, we don't like to do things that are gonna get us hurt or push us to kind of our limits that could lead to injury or death. So people excel at sports during their 20s and 30s because that is their prime time. So as we get older, we just don't like to do things that are going to be out of the limit or out of the boundary. And another reason why their athletic prime time is during their 20s and 30s is because youth can go into their professional career faster in a rate than a regular career. So from the time we're born, youth can go into a professional sports career by their 20s or 30s. But for like a regular job, like in the business industry, it takes probably 40 to 50 years to really get settled into that industry and really be good at your job. And it's just much harder for older people to give up a sport that they once enjoyed because they know that they're getting closer to lose it. So kind of like that last time, if you're playing a sport, you know it's going to be much harder to lose because you probably won't play it again in your life. So the mega business of sports. So corporations are always looking to find, sell, or promote their product and company. And it's kind of the same way in the sports world. Teams and players are always looking to promote themselves and promote their brand. That's just the way they make money and make themselves known. And there's this thing called NASCARization. So if you know, NASCAR drivers and cars have all the logos and branding all over their uniforms and cars. And it's really the same thing in the sports world. We've now seen like uniforms come out and teams wearing more like corporation logos and brands. And this is just a way for business to get their name out there, but also for athletes to try to promote themselves in that world too. And they will even try to promote themselves by going to like other countries and get their name known there, so they can just make more money out of it that way. And a big thing that has really come up recently is video games. So video games like NBA or FIFA, those are just ways to for athletes to not only get their name out there, but for these brands like NBA to make more money off of just the games that everyone's want to play. So gender and racial inequalities. So how women's gender and race intersect. So kind of going all the way back to the history of women, women have always kind of fallen behind men since the beginning of time. We never really got looked at as being a priority and being important. We kind of just had the backseat to men because we were given less money, publicity, and fame, especially in sports. Women didn't start playing sports to about 150 years ago, which really isn't that long if you really think about it. And then there's something called the porcelain doll femininity. And this is kind of just like a long time ago, women were looked at as being too like weak and fragile, so they couldn't really do anything but stay in the house or take care of the kids, clean the house, that kind of thing. Even now, an example I think of is officiating. So I know like when I'm playing basketball, like I can't play the same as like boys do today because if I kind of react out, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to react the same as men because I'm a woman. So like something that a male does in a basketball game, he probably will get away with it, but for me, I'll probably end up getting a foul or a technical. So that's just an example of how women and men are just looked at as differently, and I just don't think it's very fair. So has Title IX really benefited all women? Title IX helped get more women opportunities to play sports, but has really only opened the door for mostly white women. Many experts who study Title IX actually say that the law did not benefit women across all races. So back when Title IX first got put into place, white women were the primary benefactors, and it didn't really take into account race and income. And even now, we look at gender equity, and more white women are becoming leaders and head coaches at a much greater rate than black women. And that's just because it takes so much more time for black women to like prove themselves and prove that they're worthy of how they benefit the work world or the sports world. And it just hasn't really equaled out yet to become actually fair for Title IX to have, say, benefited all women. So once again, according to the NCAA's demographic database, white women make up the largest percentage of female athletes across all three divisions at 68%. And that statistic was from the 2020-2021 year. Black women were at 11%, and most of them were only in two different sports: basketball, where they represented 30%, or indoor/outdoor track, where they represented 20%. Black women were hardly represented in most other sports, with only having 5% or less in softball, tennis, soccer, golf, and swimming. This is just a lot because our society has made these just like descriptions on what black women should participate in, and how we get looked at as just we shouldn't be playing softball or tennis or soccer just because those aren't really our sports. When we should, like, there should be more diversity in these sports and inclusion, but instead we just don't have it yet, and it hasn't been equaled out enough. So in college sports, track and basketball have been more accessible and conventional for black girls, and that's just because everyone is going along with it. If you see one black girl doing track, or most of them doing track, then you're probably going to do track if you're black. But if you see only one on the tennis or golf team, then you probably most likely won't do it just because you don't want to be like an outcast or not fit in. So scholarship money and leadership roles. So how women get slighted of money and job opportunities. So women in sports today as coaches. Title IX has increased women's participation in sports, but has sidelined them as coaches. Statistics show that in 2019, only 42% of D1 head coaches of women's sports teams were actually women. This means that over half of the coaches in D1 sports were men. And research has just shown that women kind of react to women better and just respond to women better. And more money was pumped into sports due to Title IX, so men become more eager to take these higher paying jobs. So kind of what my next point is what I'm going on is the coaching model in general is just not successful right now for females to become successful coaches. So when a woman wants to have a family or needs to go on maternity leave, like she has to leave the industry to go do this. And that is when men kind of sneak in and take the jobs. And as they do better and better, they get pay increases. And that's just how they make the most money. But we need to make it more accessible for women to be able to stay in this industry and have these jobs, because as more men come in this industry, more women are leaving. And that's just not making it very equal or have equity in this sport. So sports today as players. Women's sports in general do not hardly get any coverage. And if they do, it's kind of just mostly on a national level. Like if it was a super big game that the whole nation would want to view. An example of this was in 2020 when Sarah Fuller became nationally known for being the kicker on Vanderbilt's winless football team. Kind of the point I'm going off of this is that she got so much attention because she was the exception, not the model. Like it should not be such an outcast thing for her to be playing football when we want more girls who are playing football or more girls to be participating in sports like swimming and golf and tennis, when it's not very known for these women to be out there with men. And she was able to gain more attention from playing on the football team than she ever did for being a goalie on Vanderbilt's winning women's soccer team, who was actually very good and I'm pretty sure have won multiple national championships in soccer. But she ended up getting more attention on the football team. So women in leadership roles, women have never really seen were never really seen as being leaders until recently, especially colored women. Women bring greater social impacts on pay, equity, and change in workplace environments that benefit both men and women, and they just make the workplace just more diverse. This is a picture of Sandra Douglas Morgan, who was recently hired as a Las Vegas Raiders team president. She was hired after many allegations with other presidents over workplace dysfunction and allegations over financial mismanagement were made. In her becoming president, this actually makes her the first Black woman to become president of an NFL team. So discrimination among women's scholarship money. At the University of South Florida, they gave more athletic scholarship money to their football team than all their women's teams combined. And on their football team, I'm pretty sure they had like 120 male athletes, and they gave more money to them than all 10 of their women's teams combined. And if that doesn't show a discrepancy, I don't really know what does. This type of discrimination has existed for more than 18 years. And to make up for that time, many schools would have to offer women anywhere from 11 million to 15 million to make up for that time and all the money they should have gotten when they really didn't get it. And this is why many women have to end up paying debt after college, when these women have probably played their whole collegiate careers, and most men don't even really step foot on a court or a field and get their whole college paid for, while women are only on like partial or half scholarships and still have to make up that debt even though they're the ones playing and the males aren't. A scholarship can change whether an athlete attends that school or not, and a scholarship sends a message to women about how much them and their talents are valued. The money that they get is real money, and it will truly make a difference in their lives in the future. And right now, sports like softball and soccer barely have enough scholarships to fill their starting lineups. No women's sports teams gets more than 20 like full ride scholarships. So sports like soccer and softball have to split up these multiple different ways to get each athlete a different partial scholarship. when football can get as many full scholarships as, I think it's like up to like 60 as they want. And this is just isn't fair for women because they're only getting partial scholarships, and some of the men aren't even really getting playing time on the field. And these softball and soccer girls have had to work their way up to really get their name and their team known for their school. So, scholarship rules. The NCAA has certain rules for scholarships, but tend to be unfair and equity. The rules set by the NCAA schools limit allow them to put 85 football players on full-ride scholarships, but no women's teams can get more than 20. So, kind of going back to what I talked to, the men just get way more opportunities and more resources than women do, and that is why women just don't have the opportunities right now to be successful as the men. And many universities decide to adhere to NCAA rules and violate federal law at the expense of female athletes. So kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, the going around Title IX, schools do this because they want to just make it look like they're representing female athletes, but they're really not, and that is at the expense of female athletes because they're not getting the same opportunities and resources as men, and I blame that back on the schools. So the Education Department has never revoked a school's federal funding over Title IX violations, so even though these schools are going around these laws, no school has ever not received funding from Title IX violations. This means that athletes are left to figure out violations by themselves and taking matter into their own hands by suing the institution. So kind of like the Georgia high schooler, her school was not listening to her, so she had to go back and take matters into her own hands by suing the school herself. And it actually ended up being good because she was able to get a new softball field. So even if colleges could give women enough scholarship money, there would just not be enough opportunities. So women in professional sports. If we want women to play professional sports, most of them right now have to go overseas because the U.S. does not offer enough opportunities. We just don't have the resources right now to support women as much as we need to, and that's why other countries do. And so they end up going over there and usually end up making more money over there because women in professional sports here just make a lot less compared to men's. All the money and attention is pumped into the NBA and the NFL and the programs like the WNBA just are left kind of in the dust. And even like Women's USA Soccer, they had to fight for their pay, and it took a few years to actually get equal pay. And it shouldn't take that much effort or that much energy to actually get equal pay for us doing the same thing as men are doing. And unfortunately, more women get paid at sports where fans are focused on the women's looks in the actual sport. So an example of this is football and lingerie. These women have just kind of accepted that they're gonna make money off of their athletic looks rather than their athletic ability. And that is never something we want women to kind of bring the bar or the standard down to. We shouldn't have to bring it down that far just for us to get more money or something that we need. And I just feel like that's a discrepancy, especially in the professional sports world. So a conclusion. So there's still a lot more to do for women's sports. Other issues still continue to arise, such as transgender athletes and NIL opportunities. And I talk a little bit about this in my blog that you guys all have access to. So kind of thinking back to the question I asked in the beginning, if you have been an athlete, what would you say is the biggest barrier you've had to face in your athletic career? And I want you to put yourself in a woman's shoes and think about what work needs to be done in order to achieve equality in women's sports. So kind of going back to my thesis, although both men and women participate in a number of similar sports, women have been underrated, underpaid, and underappreciated for many years despite legislation efforts. And kind of going back through with my presentation and my facts about Title IX, and kind of showing you guys the statistics and the data that prove this. I hope that this proves that Title IX has increased women's participation in sports, but women are still at a disadvantage with unfair and unequal opportunities, and it is necessary to change change this and give women more opportunities and the resources to continue playing sports like I know everyone wants them to. So if you have any more questions after, we're gonna have a few minutes here for some question and answers, but if you have any more questions after this, you can email me at my student email or my personal email. Thank you for listening. And now I'd like to open it up for some questions.
How do you want them to do that? Do you want them to
they can just turn on their microphones? Yeah.
Okay, good. I have a question then. And I think I actually typed this in maybe your week 11, but what do you think middle school and high schools can do? Because we know we have to start early. What do you think middle school and high schools can do to recruit more girls into doing sports at school, the wide variety of them, especially our girls of color? Like what can we do?
Well, I know, like, especially even going from like elementary school, I know we have like Girls on the Run and that kind of stuff, but just offering more programs that students would want to get involved in. And like even in middle school, I think the earliest we can start like sports in 6th grade is in 6th grade, but that's only for like cross country. And then basketball doesn't start till 8th grade, and track doesn't start till 7th and 8th grade. So just starting those opportunities earlier would really open up the door for resources and get female athletes more involved into those sports. And just kind of having more role models. I know like I kind of stayed in the DMPS district because I want to be a role model for other young athletes, especially colored athletes. So just having those people, and especially high schoolers who younger girls can look up to, is an important thing that we need to have, especially in the DMPS district. And that'll just want to get more girls involved in these sports and want them to get out there and play.
Hey, AJ, great job.
Thank you.
One of the arguments that some folks like to make is that the amount of money invested in men's sport is related to the amount of money men's sport brings in. And a counter argument that has been made to that is that the systemic under investment over the years is what caused the lack of, capitalistic interest in female sports as opposed to male sports. So do you agree with that counter argument? Do you have other perspectives that you would want to add to that?
I do agree with that argument. I think kind of going back from the beginning of time, women have never just really gotten the resources or respect that we deserved. And now, like, people are going to make the argument that, oh, people watch men's sports because it's much more interesting, or it's much more like they do dunks and all this cool stuff. Yes, that is true, but women, like even now, like there's women dunking, and yet they still haven't gotten the attention they deserved. I know I've seen women dunk, at least 3 different women in collegiate games, and yet there's not that much attention over them, and that is a huge thing. Like we're doing things that just as well as men are doing, yet we still haven't gotten the attention. And I do agree with that argument that it is underlying factors that have built this just unfair resources, and allocations of resources have led to us just not being treated as equally as men.
I'm terrible with wait time, so I'm going to jump in. When you gave those examples of the colleges that were really being very tricky, really illegal, and so 2 of the schools were Wisconsin and Michigan, which are both Big Ten schools, which is very disappointing, right? So what do you think is the responsibility of the conferences themselves to police each other to make sure they're following the actual federal guidelines?
I think it's a big responsibility, just because the NCAA is so big, with all the colleges they have to look out after. So that's kind of why they're not catching these underlying or like going around the Title IX. So I think we do need to put it back on the conferences to make it their responsibility to make sure that these schools are following all the requirements that they need to. And I think that's actually a good idea. Even to put it back on the athletic directors of that school to actually recheck the numbers and make sure that we're giving women the same opportunities and not kind of going around just because we want our school to look better or make it look better for the press. So yeah, I think it really does need to fall back on the conference and the athletic directors of the school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for all your hard work. I'm wondering what you feel about college level athletes now being able to get paid. And I've seen a lot of press about how for women athletes, it turns into like Instagram pictures of themselves versus them playing their sport.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that's going to impact women in sports?
It's really funny because I was actually just having this conversation with my mom. I think NIL is a good way for women to kind of equal the game with men's sports, but right now it's only been like the top of the top athletes. So if you think about like Caitlin Clark, she's kind of like the only ones that I know that have gotten like NIL opportunities off of her actual sport. And anyone else, kind of like you said, it's off of Instagram or TikTok. And that's just not the same. Like, we're lowering the standard just to try to get equal opportunities. But for men, it's just even like the players who don't even play sometimes are getting these small NIL opportunities or big NIL opportunities. And it's just not the same because women are working just as hard to try to get the same opportunities. But we have to lower the standard kind of based off our looks to try to get more money. So yeah, it's right now I don't think the NIL is in the benefit for women. It's more benefiting men right now, but I think it could change as more NIL gets more kind of in the system with the NCAA.
I am going to stop the recording just because in a minute I'm going to have to pop to another presentation.
Yeah.
But I would like to thank the audience member